listening to Europe's #1 pro wrestling podcast.
Set no substitutes.
Bringing you the best in pro wrestling interviews, news, and opinions with Mr. Stevie Knight.
Yes, Stevie Knight with a K, K-N-I-G-H-T. That is I with the podcast once again. Happy to be re-recording this for you to listen to. This was with my very first guest last year, who at the time was the current TNA World Heavyweight Champion, which was Nick Magnus Aldis. Now, of course, using the name Nick Aldis, has left TNA. Loads of stuff has happened since this was recorded, but I'm going to put it back out there because there was so much stuff on there, and Nick was worried afterwards that he said a few things that maybe he shouldn't, so obviously doesn't matter too much now, but have a listen through. Nick's still doing very well for himself, has just done a little tour of the UK, now working for Global Force Wrestling, and I've got to say, I mean, he doesn't tell me everything that goes on in his life, but very surprised to see Nick not in NXT just yet. Pretty much got everything he needs. He's tall, he's got a fantastic build, he's got a great personality, he talks well. I don't fancy him, just to clarify that. I'm talking from a wrestling standpoint. Very surprised, and wouldn't be surprised to see Nick in NXT at some point. So this is recorded from last year. This is Nick Aldis, alias Magnus.
Hey, how you doing, Nick?
I'm good, Steve. Good to hear from you. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. The last time I think I actually shook your hand in person, I was being dragged off by you from a very small show in Norwich in the UK.
Oh, God, yeah. I think that might have been my first ever show.
It could have been around those, the small towns in the Norfolk area.
Yeah, I think that it was at the Talk, and I was in a battle royal, and I think was that the one with Jake the Snake on it?
It could have been, yeah. Who knows? So
I'm sure it was my very first night on the job, actually.
Crazy to think. It doesn't seem all that long ago, and just a few years later, life has certainly changed for you. Current TNA World Heavyweight Champion, going out with a diva, and living in Florida. How has life changed for you, Nick? Give us the ups and downs of what's happened to you in the last few years.
Well, obviously, I guess when we first met, I was probably 18, something like that. Just sort of taking my first few bumps and just sort of very much just kind of dipping my toe into the independent wrestling circuit in Britain and everything like that. And I'm a beneficiary of circumstance. I think that I look at sort of the way that things sort of panned out for me over the last few years, and it was just one of those situations where like I had a sprinkling of luck and then was able to sort of capitalize on each thing, from one to the next. Obviously, most people who are somewhat familiar with my career, or my path at least, know that the sort of the major kind of turning point, or major sort of milestone was getting cast on Gladiators. I was only I was 21, and I'd been in the business like 3 years, and then off the back of that, it gave me a national profile and exposure and everything like that. And at the time, TNA's business happened to be really starting to grow, especially in Britain. So then that was how one thing sort of led to another, and Dixie picked up a magazine. FSM did a feature on me, and Dixie saw it, and and then I just remember James, the editor of FSM, contacted me and being like, "Hey, Dixie just asked if she could have your contact details. Do you mind?" And I was like, "No, I don't mind, of course."
Yeah, I'm not interested really, to be honest. I'd rather keep doing these shows in Bognor,
Yeah.
It's certainly come a long way for you. Let's go back a little bit. Tell people, how did you get started? Because the business in Britain, if people are listening all around the world with this, hopefully we'll kick things off with this very first edition of the show. If people don't know, I was a professional wrestler myself, and I met you, and I always consider myself to have a good eye for people. And I saw you on this first show. Tall guy, what is 6'4"? Good physique and things along those lines, which is always very important in Britain because good physiques at the time very hard to come by. There's a lot of of pot-bellied guys running about. I think there probably still is as well, to be honest with you. Big thing that I noticed about you, you always promoted yourself very well. One of the things I always tried to tell guys was, get photographs taken, start to promote yourself, get professional things done. Tell us a little bit about what you did to get yourself noticed.
I think, yeah, you're right, and it's funny because I do remember you kind of saying stuff to me along the lines of, hey, I think you could be all right one day, lad, kind of thing, and I sort of think, he's only just met me, but I'm glad you think so. But you'd encountered a lot of people that had gone on to do bigger and better stuff. Like you were close with Doug, and you knew Burchill and guys like that. So you understood. You had self-awareness, which to me, I always say that's probably the key, the most fundamentally necessary component to being successful in pro wrestling, and to maintain it is having self-awareness. And that's probably the one thing that most guys who don't make it absolutely don't have, is that ability to look at themselves and go, all right, this I couldn't control, but all this was my fault, and I'm the shit, so I need to improve on this, and I fucked that up, or whatever. And it's normally the people who don't have that, and just sort of and are busy getting in their sort of comfort zone that don't ever seem to, get any further. And it's interesting that you mentioned about self-promotion and stuff, because I was sort of one of those people that from the beginning knew that, so much of what you do is just about perception. I guess I was quite a perceptive guy anyway, but I was able to realize pretty early on that half of what you read wasn't true. You know what I mean? And sort of go well, this person claims to be the first person to ever do this, or the biggest that, or blah blah blah. And then you see, well, this guy over here claims to do the same thing, and it was all kind of the only thing you ever believed as gospel was anything that came from WWF. Or anything. If it was on TV, it was true. You know what I mean? And
absolutely.
And I picked up on that quite quickly and said, I think if you just, you sprinkle, you kind of, you sprinkle a little bit of embellishment on everything you're telling people, you're sending out to people, but as long as you don't flat out sort of tell lies and go as long as you don't get yourself up to look like a complete dick, you're probably going to be okay.
Yep.
And I just, I think that you'll probably see the same thing. One person I always mention when it comes to self-promotion and really kind of portraying themselves as a star was Sheamus. He was always really good at that too. He had this ability to sort of really, he really kind of solidified his status, without really doing all that much. And that's not a knock on Sheamus. I like him a lot. He's a good friend of mine. I saw him recently, but it's he understood the same thing, that it's a business, and you're the shop window. You know what I mean? That's the way I always looked at it.
I'm interested to know, before we move on to you moving out to America and things, who did you work with in the UK that taught you a lot?
Well, I broke in with Paddy Knight, as you know, and that they were working a lot at the time, so they would do weekend camps. They would do sort of training camps once every sort of 5 or 6 weeks, and it would be a whole weekend, which would be good actually, because it would be good to be there for the whole, for you to be there from sort of 10 o'clock in the morning on the Saturday right through to sort of 10 o'clock at night on the Sunday, and you'd do a lot. And, and I will say this about them, they did early on, my first camp there especially, they were really big onto the conditioning side of things. They really did make us do a lot of drills and all that sort of stuff. Not necessarily to say that they were all doing it themselves, but they made us do it, and that and that was a good thing, because cardio is the hardest thing to maintain, and if you want to do well, you've got to have good cardio, because otherwise you're always kind of battling against yourself.
Tell me about it, Nick. Yeah,
it's funny because it's cardio is more of an issue to me now than ever, because when you work TV, you don't ever really work. You only you work sort of short matches, and then if you're not doing any house shows and stuff, you're never really putting any ring time in. And when when we were doing the camps and all that, you never even thought about it, because you were wrestling every day, and you didn't even think. It wasn't even it was completely automatic. You didn't even think about getting blown up and stuff. And now it's all the time I'm going. I should probably do some cardio today and, like, you know, really make sure that I keep my wind going, because otherwise I'm going to just, you know, I'm going to be dying in the, you know, on the house shows next week, or when I get to TV, I'm going to be, you know, breathing out my ass after 5 minutes.
And I always found back in the day when I actually did do something before I turned into this fat dinosaur, that it doesn't matter how much cardio you actually do, it's not ring time. You never actually get ring fit.
No, like I'm always. I mean, our schedule since Christmas has been pretty stacked. Like we've done since I got back. Like I flew back on Boxing Day. I went home for Christmas. We flew back Boxing Day, and we did. You know, we've done. I think I've done like 8 shows or something, and then, you know, got 2 more this week. So we're pretty steady with the house shows now, which is good. You know, it's for the next sort of month or so. Like we've got a lot of live events, and then the UK tour, and then a lot more house shows coming up. So it's nice, because I felt like by the end of the last loop, we just did 3 shows in Arkansas and Tennessee, and it was like by the end of that loop, I've been working with Joe and with Bobby Roode, and by the end of that loop, I finally felt like, okay, I'm back in the groove now. Do you know what I mean? I can, you know, I'm not worried about getting blown up anymore, because those first couple of nights they were on there.
So you get the call, you're on your way out, you're in TNA Wrestling. Is this where, now I know you didn't like this, we spoke about this at the time, the tremendous new wrestling outfit makes its appearance?
Oh, God. Well, here's the weird thing. Like, you know, people, I did sort of try to remind myself of this sometimes, but I try and, like, tell other people, too, that when I did Gladiators, I'd been probably wrestling for like less than 2 years, and basically took the elements that, you know, that I was good at in wrestling at the time, because I could talk. You know, that was about the only thing I could do at the time. I couldn't really do much else. I didn't really know a headlock from a headlight, but I was like, you know, but I was a decent promo. I could talk pretty good, and I was and that's sort of what made me stand out on Gladiators, was that I was able to, you know, create a character and be kind of outrageous and all the rest of it, where everyone else was just trying to be really kind of stoic and boring and serious and everything. And I was just like, no one's going to care about that. Like, let's, you know, I don't care if I win or lose. I'll just kind of just be like a generic, like, 80s wrestling heel and just kind of cut these sort of Flair style promos, like, down the lens, and no one else will dare do it. And sure enough, like, it caught on. So I assumed that the creative team at TNA had seen this, so I assumed that they would just kind of have me show up and be, you know, like a sort of a wrestling version of like who I was. You know what I mean? Because that's essentially what which is pretty much what I am now, but it's what, you know, which is what I probably should have been from the start, which was, you know, like most good characters, like an extension of your real personality, just really kind of enhanced and exemplified. And then they did say to me, I got an email, like in typical, at the time, I mean, I have to point this out, that it was a completely different management structure then. Like, it was a whole different, like, Terry Taylor was head of talent, Vince Russo was writing, Dutch Mantel was there, Jeff Jarrett was there, you know, Savio Vega was there. Like, you know, it was, I mean, it was a completely different team almost. So, in typical fashion of that team at the time, everything was so last minute. I remember, like, giving them my schedule and sort of saying, because I had Panto straight after Gladiators too. I was film season 2, and TNA had signed me, and they said, we want to start you, like, I do remember I'd already signed. Like, I'd talked with Terry, and me and Dixie had gone back and forth, and I'd signed a contract, and they knew that I wouldn't be able to start until, like, January of 2009, and this was like in the sort of autumn of 2008, and I gave him all my dates, you know, and I said, like, I remember distinctly, I literally had officially 1 day off. Like, I said, okay, like, Gladiators filming finishes on this date, and then I go to Norwich to start Panto, like, this date, there was like 1 day's grace in between, and that was only because my agent, like, really kind of begged the director and stuff to give me 1 day off at least, to just, like, to get my shit together and, like, to relax. So TNA, like, I remember getting I'm sitting in the green room at Gladiators, like, we're a day filming, and I remember getting this email from Terry going, hey, we want to fly you out to Nashville on the date, the